Good morning, and welcome to our Unitarian Universalist Church of Sarasota and our Lakewood Ranch Unitarian Universalists, and a special welcome to our visitors as well. My name is the Reverend Doug Wadkins. I am the interim senior minister. I will be your celebrant and presenting the sermon this morning. Let's begin with some projected announcements and a prelude by Don Brin. Again, we're really glad to have you as part of our live stream service this morning. We're especially welcoming of our visitors. We hope that while you are here, you'll take a moment to go to the website and our homepage. If you click on a banner that's marked Welcome Visitors, it will take you to a section that gives you a lot of helpful information about this congregation. Also, while you're there, if you sign our virtual guest book, we will send you our weekly newsletter, The Contact, as well as sending you links to our various events throughout the week. We hope that you will give these events a try as you are able so that you can get to know us more directly as a community. You'll also notice on that front page a donate button with a basket, and if you click on that, you're able both to give to the congregation and also, and I'll tell you more in a moment, for our Share the Plate offering. It is especially essential in this time that your generosity help us do our important work together. Also today, after the service at about 11:30, we will have our coffee hour. It's a chance to say hello to members of the community and to break into smaller groups in order to have a conversation about how things have been going during the week. I hope you'll join us. It's a wonderful way to get to know people. Finally, this is our Share the Plate Sunday, and our recipient is All Faiths Food Bank. To tell you more about the work of the food bank and how you can help, here is a video talking about their important work.
Hello, everyone. I am Becky Wright. Thank you so much for allowing me to talk about All Faiths Food Bank with you today. Our mission is, together with our partners, we provide healthy solutions to end hunger in our community. I think that we can all agree that 2020 was a challenging year that we won't forget anytime soon. But I'm also proud to share with you how we helped our community during those difficult times. In 2020, we distributed more than 22.4 million pounds of food, and over 18.4 million meals were distributed. All Faiths Food Bank offers mobile pantries for people to pick up fresh produce, meats, and groceries at 26 sites in 32 monthly distributions. And like our mobile pantries, we also offer farm markets for people to pick up fresh produce at 9 sites with 16 monthly distributions. School pantries provide fresh produce, meats, and groceries to families at 11 sites with 22 distributions. Our backpack program provides students with nutritious food for the weekends at over 53 schools and organizations. We have teamed up with local healthcare providers to screen and identify folks struggling with food insecurity. In 2019, we opened the DeSoto Food and Resource Center. At our resource center, clients can meet with staff to assess their needs, receive food, and receive or be referred to services. There are so many different ways to get involved with our food bank. One way is by becoming a volunteer. To register, go to allfaithsfoodbank.org/volunteer, or you can get involved by making a donation. Visit allfaithsfoodbank.org/donate. When you donate to All Faiths Food Bank, you help parents provide for children, like local mom Sylvia. She wants to thank the community for helping her put nutritious meals on her family's table. The money her family saves on groceries help them save money for other items for their little girl, like diapers and clothes. Speaking of children, on April 1st, we launched our campaign against summer hunger. When school ends for summer, how do these children find the help that they need? Our campaign has become our community's strongest line of defense against child hunger. Now until May 15th, when you donate towards our campaign against summer hunger, your donations will be matched dollar for dollar, doubling the impact. Thank you all so much for allowing me to talk about All Faiths Food Bank with you today. For more information or to make a donation, please visit allfaithsfoodbank.org. Thank you.
We are really grateful and excited to be partnering with All Faith Food Bank. So again, we would invite you before you leave worship today to go to our homepage, click on the donate button, and you will be able to give generously, we hope, to their ongoing work. Now, as we move into our service, we invite you to find a candle or use your chalice at home. In a few moments, together, we will light our chalice. For chalice lighting, we share the words of Naomi King. How shall we begin to live out our free faith? Nurture this precious light. When we do, we are beacons of freedom, creating a space to rest, explore, and innovate. How we keep this lamp of truth and justice affects how and whether we are transforming inequity through witness and action. As we nurture this precious light together, we become a light of hope, turning isolation into community, anguish into peace, sorrow into joy. And now, we light this chalice in the spirit of the first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. I invite you to join us in our opening hymn, hymn number 1000. If you have the hymnal, Morning Has Come. And now we move into the core of our service and invite you to a time of centering. We begin our centering time with the words of the Reverend Kendall Gibbons. It is obvious to anyone who has any historical or international awareness that there is something that the world's most acknowledged spiritual leaders have in common. Some attributes that characterize the Gandhis and Dalai Lamas, Mother Teresa's, and Martin Luther King's of the world, no matter what historical religious tradition they identify with. And of course, these qualities are not limited to those who achieve wide recognition. They exist with French villagers who hide Jews from the Nazis, in Rwandan hotel keepers, in neighbors and teachers and elders everywhere, who exemplify for us what it means to grow into radical acceptance of others, self-awareness, active compassion, and sacrificial love that are the highest expressions of any faith. Now I invite you to a time of centering and quiet, and then join us in singing Spirit of Life.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea. Move in the hand, giving life and shape of justice. Roots hold me close, King, come to me.
And now a reading in preparation for this morning's reflection and sermon from The Velveteen Rabbit by Marjorie Williams. The Skin Horse had lived longer in the nursery than any of the others. He was so old that his brown coat was bald in patches and showed the seams underneath. Most of the hair in his tail had been pulled out to string bead necklaces. He was wise, for he had seen a long succession of mechanical toys arrive to boast and swagger and by break their mainsprings and pass away. And he knew that they were only toys and would never turn into anything else. For nursery magic is very strange and wonderful, and only those playthings that are old and wise and experienced, like the Skin Horse, understand all about it. "What is real?" asked the rabbit one day when they were lying side by side near the nursery fender, before Nana came to tidy the room. "Does it mean having things that buzz inside and a stick-out handle?" "Real isn't how you are made," said the Skin Horse. "It's a thing that happens to you. When a child loves you for a long, long time, not just to play with, but really loves you, then you become real." "Does it hurt?" said the rabbit. "Sometimes," said the Skin Horse, for he was always truthful. "When you are real, you don't mind being hurt." "Does it happen all at once, like being wound up?" he asked, "or bit by bit?" "It doesn't happen all at once," said the Skin Horse. "You become. It takes a long time. That's why it doesn't happen often to people who break easily, have sharp edges, or who have to be carefully kept. Generally, by the time you are real, most of your hair has been loved off, your eyes drop out, and you get loose in the joints and very shabby. But these things don't matter at all, because once you are real, you can't be ugly, except to people who don't understand." Here ends our reading. They were gathered around the table. a ministerial search committee, and they were gleaning from the survey results some of the guidelines, a sort of wish list for the selection of their minister. An engaged and diverse group of Unitarian Universalists sitting around that large table and working to narrow down their 3 top qualities for their future senior minister. Interestingly enough, all but one of their lists included spiritual maturity. And the one person who didn't list that said simply, when we found out everyone else had, "I don't even know what that means." Well, back in theology school, we all had to take classes in the foundational ideas of religious education. It was there that I first encountered the stages of faith development as posited by James Fowler in his work, Stages of Faith. I love that Fowler talked about the human development of faith as something separate from beliefs and in a person's specific religious tradition. It may be helpful to see a distinction between religion as a set of answers and beliefs, and religion as an ongoing journey of deepening and maturing. You see here Fowler's 6 stages of development, and this is not a sermon on faith development per se. I've included it to just give you some sense of the direction that the ongoing journey Fowler identifies with. Many faith traditions would actually take exception to Fowler's hypothesis, for you would notice upon exploring it that he believes that we move from the concrete and literal, from the insular and exclusive, to the more abstract, symbolic, and inclusive understandings of religion. This is consistent with the broad trajectory supposition, the 6th and final stage, presented like it is some sort of great grand prize. That stage includes the likes of Gandhi, Mother Teresa, the Dalai Lama, similar to our reading before. People that might be called saints or bodhisattvas. It is said that the great mark of the rare people who are considered to be in this stage is that they live in a kind of universal understanding of life. More often, they are people in whom there are glimpses of this way of seeing and living in the world. It's a hard way to actually live fully and consistently, I will admit. And one synopsis of this description from a UUA curriculum says, they live with a felt participation in a power that unifies and transforms the world. For this reason, many times they are seen as subversive by the establishment and often die at the hands of those they wish to change. Certainly that probably doesn't make it the most attractive job description in the world. But nonetheless, human beings are ever changing and evolving. And we generally tend to believe that this movement towards the universal and the unifying, at least in traditions like ours, is a very good thing. So one can talk about spiritual growth and maturity of individuals, but it is also important, I believe, to link them carefully with our connection with community. Community continues to grow in a variety of ways and change as well. And as more of its individuals change, so too will the community be transformed. And by our relationship with the community, our own inner life will be changed. One of the most gracious aspects of just such thinking is that spiritual maturity and depth of community is always greater than the sum of its parts. The advantage of building community is that there is the sum total of the wisdom and integrity of the gathered, and the added bonus of some sort of synergistic good that can come in addition. At our best, we can inspire each other to new heights and depths, and I've seen it time and time again. And it is also true that the opposite can happen, but fortunately, that is usually a temporary setback, and the larger communal good takes over eventually. I've experienced that the general movement of such a congregation really is for the good. They do mature together. And it is also gracious that in any one time, we are all in different spaces and places in our existence. And at times, we are more at our best than others. In a community, even a small one, a well integrated, centered group can foster a greater depth and maturity within a community, so that often it acts in the direction of a power that unifies and transforms the world, even if some of its members individually are not on board. A strong minority in the congregation who really gets it can help create a sense of radical acceptance of others, self-awareness, and active compassion. And from that place, we can do great good and support each other more effectively. So, what would it look like to describe some of the common things that are true both for individuals and for community? Well, that's what I would like to explore with you for the rest of our time. For a few moments, let me offer you a vision of what both a congregation and individuals on the journey towards that greater sense of spiritual realization might look like. Let me say that almost without exception, these points could easily be interplayed between who individuals are on their journey and what a community is like as it journeys forward. But I will call this list 7 Habits of Spiritually Mature People and Communities. So let's start on that list. Fowler's groundbreaking work on faith development asks questions like, what are you spending and being spent for? What commands and receives your best time, your best energy? What powers or power do you rely on and trust? To what or whom are you committed in life? I like these questions because they're not so much about what we would call traditional religious beliefs. These questions do not lead a person to answer in a way that assumes one's religious tradition's orthodox answer as the best answer. Instead, these questions are open to the lived experience of each person. They draw out of you the answers that are likely to change and grow as you continue on your journey of growth and discovery, of development and maturity. It is not about arriving at an ultimate set of timeless and permanent truths. Rather, it is about developing the qualities of spiritual maturity. So says Doug Taylor. First on our list is, a spiritually mature person has a clear understanding of who they are. They can speak to it, and most importantly, they act from this understanding, and who they are not as well. And they make choices about their time and energy accordingly, which are in answer to the 2 questions above it most directly. So a strong sense of an individual and a community story shape who we are, and they are therefore essential. And it can be a careful balancing act because there must be some connection with the past in these stories, but we must not be stuck either as individuals or as a community in the past. So often taking a wider view rather than an excessively rigid interpretation of the stories that shape us are helpful. It is sometimes one of the most difficult aspects of maturity to understand the power of what we focus on in our day-to-day existence. And so most of us find ourselves being called to delve more deeply into certain areas at certain times. But at our greatest point, we are able to use our time and talent in powerful ways by using that focus to intensify our efforts. So the second point is, spiritually mature people are aware of their feelings about power. And rather than immediately moving to conflict or worst case scenarios, they seek to share it, utilize it, confront it wisely. Within individuals, especially Unitarian Universalists, we continue to work on how we understand power, the ability to make change in the world, and the ways in which we use that power in our own lives. But as importantly, especially important in our congregations, is the way that we share authority, the way that we share power. And so one of the most essential things that happens in a congregation is that they understand that sharing of power. That has to do with things that sound very unsexy, like polity, and governance. But at their heart, they make all the difference in the ability of a congregation to live out its mission and transform the world. And that's certainly true for an individual as well. The way that we understand our own power makes all the difference in how we utilize ourselves for change agents in what matters most to us. The next point of spiritual maturity is spiritually mature folks are secure enough to risk being radically accepting by being open to change and transformation by a variety of new people, and perhaps even scarier, new ideas, and scariest of all, doing things differently. An open heart and mind have infinite capacity because at their core, they are about creating space. When we drop our defenses enough to hear an idea for the truth it may speak to us, we grow in ways that we could scarcely imagine. And when we give people, some of whom may live outside of our comfort zone at first, a chance to find their way into our midst, we often find ourselves in relationships that give us gifts we never expected, but we grow to appreciate them deeply. Both involve growing pains, and we need to be more patient with ourselves and each other in the midst of those pains. But they're worth the effort. We know that as congregations bring in new generations, it asks for them to change how they understand how they are together, so that it is more inclusive of different levels of life experience and different generations' sense of identity. For instance, Diane Butler Bass talked about that since September 11th, there has been an uptick of the younger generation. But in that uptick, we've realized how there are different values, how important it is for younger people that what is said and what is actually lived out feel very consistent. And many of them find that the nastier, insignificant components of the radical right and some of the ways that we are not such a powerful and unified community, those senses of inequity are powerful deterrents for them wanting to be part of religious community. To move into the future, it asks us to think carefully about how we welcome new people and new ideas. The next one is a sign of maturity is acting from the awareness that the health of the larger community is inextricably connected to the health of the individual. Throughout time, it has been true that both the individual and almost everything that is profoundly good in one's realm brings one into connection with the larger world. And even some of the time when that connection, when that change seems like it may be a loss, ultimately it tends to bring around a greater good by focusing on the power of the greater good for the community or the world or whatever focus is most appropriate. And there's so many ways that this is lived out. One congregation, for instance, was famous for years for having one of the very best directors of religious education in churchdom. That was a famous part of their congregation, and they had a very dynamic religious education program. But when the time came when that director of religious education found that life was calling her into a different form of service, and she respectfully resigned her position, at first the congregation was appropriately grief-stricken. It was a very painful change. But then they used it as an opportunity to honestly identify first the central enduring aspects of their congregation that they wanted to hold on to and how that impacted their program of religious education. But they were also willing to candidly explore the ways that over the years in their partnership with the religious educator, they had become stuck. They had become used to certain ways of doing things that may not necessarily serve them well in the future. And so when they were able to find a new leader, they could both hold on to the core of their past successes, but bring themselves into a new time and place and really give themselves to a new partnership. And that allowed their program to continue to grow in all ways. Another important component of spiritual maturity is such communities hold members of the community accountable to each other. For many religious liberals, this is a particularly tough pill to swallow. It is difficult for any of us to really hold each other accountable. We learn that we do indeed each matter deeply, and that we are each responsible for the powerful choices we make. But we also begin to realize that in order for that to really be deeply powerful and healthy, we also need to be willing to call each other out or in, or to speak to each other honestly about times when we disappoint each other, when we fall short together or as individuals. When we say that we will do something, for instance, we need to know that the only way for a community to stay healthy is for us to do what we say we will do. And when we lightly don't do what we say we will, we leave it for someone else to take on more responsibility. And that tends to leave our community weaker. We are also accountable to how we treat one another. And we must be willing to hold each other accountable. The power of the word hold is wonderful in that sentence. We are close when we hold something. When someone hurts us in word and action, and we are willing to speak the truth to each other, that asks for a closer relationship. So, a spiritually mature person lets experiences of difficulty lead them to greater empathy and compassion. And a spiritually mature congregation also lives out that compassion actively, meaning that you take that compassionate feeling and turn it into how you are in the world and with each other. So one of the most powerful ways that faithful communities are compassionate is consistent with that holding accountable of each other. How we are able, instead of taking on each other's anxiety or allowing pain to create more difficulty within a community, how as a larger community we are able to use our larger sense of presence and calm to be present with people, but also to hold them in right relationship. For instance, one of the most powerful examples in the first congregation I served was when their board president moved into a very difficult place in his life. He found that after 25 years, his spouse was wanting a divorce, and for a time he was in a very bitter place and was very, very moody. And rather than the community overreacting, they would offer words of kindness to him and support, and at the same time, they loved him enough to create a more compassionate environment by reminding him that his difficult time was not an excuse for him to act badly towards people in his community. There were lots of moments that went something like this. The congregation would take a deep breath when he would say something mean-spirited and find the place to calmly say something like, "I can tell you are frustrated, Bill, but you have got to be kinder in your words and tone to Lois. She is actually trying to be helpful and do the right thing." And yes, sometimes that worked better than others, but in a very hard time in the life of a dedicated church volunteer, he was able to feel connected and held by his community, and they helped him not inflict any more damage in that difficult time than needed to happen to others, or for that matter, himself. Finally, spiritual persons embrace their depth. And in that depth, in that way, they are real. When someone says to us, it's time for us to get real. Some of the time it could be like in the Baptist tradition when someone would say, "Let me tell you this in Christian love," which really was an opportunity for you to duck at what was coming next. But the kind of real we are talking about has to do with being on the road to a deeper truth. That kind of real may mean getting beyond the superficial understandings of nice, not that kindness and niceness have no place. But rarely does at least the word nice come from that deepest, most authentic place. The sort of real I am talking about comes from the product of us continuing to grow. Real is how much honesty is manifest in our own life. The way that we take the experiences that are powerful, often difficult, and rather than pushing them away, we call them into our deepest selves, and we let the truth of what has happened in those difficult moments change us. While for a while that change may be about grief and loss, ultimately it is always in the direction of greater life if we allow it to be so. And even more if we are in communities that help us through those times and call us forward into a new life together. And the same is true for congregations and communities. The more that we are able to take the experiences that are powerful and significant and often difficult and really live into their truth and let that truth help us understand how we should act together for the world and with each other, the more likely that we become real in the most meaningful and transformative way. It is why Michael Doral, who writes about Unitarian Universalism and how we can be more deeply ourselves, he believes that the primary purpose of Unitarian Universalism is to help its individual and its community mature spiritually. He believes without that process, we are not living into our greatest self. So perhaps the thing that we are most called to do is to be real together, to live into the truth of what is actually happening in our lives, and then sink deeper into it so that it tells us more about what it means to share the larger life together. It is a place of health and meaningful life and community. So, what if the skin horse in the Velveteen Rabbit is right? What if a community or a person isn't real because of how they're made, but it is, quote, a thing that happens to you? Perhaps when a community expresses love and allows themselves to feel love for a long, long time, not just to play with, but really be changed by that love, then together and individually, we become real. Perhaps it is real when we don't so much mind being hurt, but we understand that anxiety and pain are all understandable reactions of dealing with human complexity in the world that we live in, especially now. And certainly it is true, as is in the words of the Velveteen Rabbit, it doesn't happen all at once. We become real bit by bit, as we learn as a community that we will not break easily, and over time that we will lose at least some of our sharp edges and will survive despite not being carefully kept. As the end of the Velveteen Rabbit says, "It doesn't happen all at once," said the skin horse. "You become. It takes a long time. That's why it doesn't happen often to people who break easily or have sharp edges or have to be carefully kept. Generally, by the time you are real, most of your hair has been loved off, your eyes drop out, and you get loose in the joints and very shabby. But these things don't matter at all, because once you are real, you can't be ugly, except to people who don't understand." May that sense of sharing and truth and understanding be ours as we journey forward. I invite you to join us in our closing hymn, hymn number 1012, When I'm Frightened.
When I am frightened, will you reassure me? When I'm uncertain, will you hold my hand? Will you be strong for me, sing to me quietly? Will you share some of your stories with me? If you will show me compassion, then I may learn to care as you do. Then I may learn to care. When I am angry, will you still embrace me? When I am thoughtless, will you understand? Will you believe in me, stand by me willingly? Will you share some of your questions with me? If you will show me acceptance, then I may learn to give as you do. Then I may learn to give. When I am troubled, will you listen to me? When I am lonely, will you be my friend? Will you be there for me, comfort me tenderly? Will you share some of your feelings with me? If you will show me commitment, then I may learn to love as you do. Then I may learn to love.
And now as we move towards the end of our service, I invite you to return to your candle or chalice at home as I read these extinguishing words. Our time together is finished, but our work is not yet done. May our spirits be renewed and our purpose resolved as we meet the challenges of the week to come. This chalice is extinguished until once again ignited by the strength of our communion. Go now in peace.